It's Asher Keddie.
It was 5 nominations before Asher won her first.
They called her the Golden Girl of Australian television, a woman whose face lit up millions of screens, whose name became synonymous with elegance, talent, and emotional truth. But what no one saw, what cameras never captured, was the night she collapsed on the bathroom floor, clutching the silence in her womb, ready to give it all up. Asher Keddie wasn't just acting heartache. She lived it. Behind every radiant award speech, behind every poised magazine cover, there was a woman quietly breaking. And the moment that almost shattered her for good, a miscarriage. One that left her questioning her body, her choices, and even her future in the profession that defined her. This isn't just a story about Asher the actress. This is about Asher the woman, torn between personal grief and public expectation. Long before she became a household name, she was already struggling in silence. And even as the world praised her performances in shows like Offspring, Love My Way, or Paper Giants, she was battling a different kind of script, one she couldn't rewrite, where the ending came too soon. Tonight, we peel back the carefully constructed image of a national treasure. What made Australia fall in love with her? And what made her almost disappear forever? This is the story of brilliance, loss, and quiet resilience. The secret that almost ended the legacy of Asher Keddie before it ever truly began. To understand Asher Keddie's place in Australian television history, one must first understand the cultural climate she emerged from. A world where soap operas ruled the ratings, where leading ladies were expected to be glamorous but emotionally reserved, and where career longevity was rare, especially for women. Born in Melbourne in 1974, Asher grew up in a middle-class household with 2 school-teacher parents. She wasn't a child of privilege or fame. Her earliest dream was to become a ballet dancer, but a knee injury at the age of 14 ended that dream abruptly. What might have crushed another teenager instead redirected Asher toward acting, a path she would walk with both determination and quiet vulnerability. In the early years, she was far from an overnight sensation. Roles came sporadically. She was a familiar face in minor television parts throughout the 1990s, appearing in shows like Blue Heelers and State Coroner, but always orbiting the spotlight, never quite in it. There was no meteoric rise, only slow-burning persistence. It wasn't until the mid-2000s that things began to shift. With her haunting performance in Love My Way, a show that was both critically acclaimed and emotionally raw, Asher began to distinguish herself from her contemporaries. She wasn't just beautiful or technically skilled. She brought something far rarer to the screen: emotional truth. Audiences felt seen through her performances. Critics lauded her for her ability to be both fragile and fierce, often in the same scene. But just as she was ascending, her personal life was becoming increasingly complex. Her first marriage to musician Jay Bowen dissolved quietly after nearly 5 years, a private heartbreak in the midst of public praise. Then came Offspring, the series that would redefine her career. As Nina Proudman, Asher didn't just act, she connected. The neurotic, romantic, and deeply human obstetrician struck a chord with an entire generation of viewers. She became more than an actress. She became a mirror for Australian women. But fame is a double-edged sword. With every award, with every headline proclaiming her the queen of drama, came mounting pressure. She was no longer allowed to be just a person. She was a symbol. And behind the carefully managed interviews and glowing magazine spreads, Asher was grappling with something far more profound than critics or fan expectations. A deep, aching desire to become a mother. It was in this quiet, unspoken desire that the most painful chapter of her life unfolded. And it's here, in the contrast between her professional zenith and personal despair, that we begin to sense the true cost of being Australia's golden girl. The miscarriage wasn't public. It wasn't tabloid fodder. But it changed everything. For a moment, it changed her relationship with acting, with the public, and even with herself. Before the glitz, the logis, and the magazine covers, there was just a girl with a limp and a shattered ballet dream. Asher Keddie was never supposed to be famous. At least, not in the way fame usually arrives, loud, fast, and young. For her, it came like a tide, slow, quiet, and only noticeable when it had already carried her far from shore. After her teenage injury forced her to give up ballet, Asher pivoted to acting with the same discipline and control she once reserved for the barre. She trained hard, took small roles without complaint, and waited years for something more than 2 lines and a single camera angle. In an industry that favored loud personalities and fast fame, she was the anomaly. Calm, private, unshakably focused. By the time Love My Way came in 2004, she was 30 and nearly invisible to the tabloid world. But the role of Julia Jackson, a woman weathering grief, trauma, and family dysfunction, would crack her open, and crack open the audience too. Suddenly, people saw her, not as a character, as Asher, raw, authentic, unafraid to fall apart on screen. The performance earned her critical acclaim and, more importantly, trust. From directors, from writers, from viewers. She became the actress you called when you wanted pain without melodrama, complexity without chaos. Then Offspring happened. In 2010, the role of Nina Proudman came to her like lightning in a bottle. It wasn't just a hit, it was a phenomenon. Nina wasn't perfect. She was messy, neurotic, too emotional, too smart, too honest. She wasn't written to be a heroine, but Asher made her one. Off-screen, the fame was louder than anything Asher had previously experienced. The awkward girl from Melbourne was now on every cover, walking every red carpet. She won 7 Logie Awards, 6 for Most Popular Actress, and 1 Gold Logie for Most Popular Personality on Australian television. Yet with every accolade came pressure. Everyone expected her to keep being brilliant, but few asked how she was coping. At the peak of her success, she was expected to juggle performances, interviews, public image, and quietly, a battle most never knew she was fighting. Because behind the bright lights, Asher wanted something deeper than applause. She wanted a child. She had fallen in love again, this time with Vincent Fantozzo, a renowned portrait artist known for his intense works and quiet demeanor. Their relationship was artistic, magnetic, and passionate. Together, they dreamed of building a family. And when she became pregnant, it seemed like everything was finally aligning. She had love, she had success, she had peace. Then it happened. The miscarriage. Sudden, silencing, earth-shattering. The cameras kept rolling. The headlines kept printing. But something in Asher stopped. She would later describe the grief as wordless, a hollowing out, a betrayal of the body, and a questioning of purpose. She was playing a character who delivered babies while privately mourning one she would never hold. Every take became a trigger, every scene a reminder. For the first time in decades, she thought of walking away from it all. The scripts, the industry, the noise, and no one knew. Because she didn't want them to. Because when you're the golden girl, there's no space for breaking. There's a scene in Offspring, one of the show's most wrenching moments, where Nina Proudman, Asher's character, loses control in a hospital corridor, her face contorted with grief, confusion, and guilt. Audiences wept. Critics praised the performance as unfiltered brilliance. What no one knew was that Asher wasn't acting, at least not entirely. Behind the scene, behind the applause, Asher was still grieving a real loss. The miscarriage hadn't just left her physically drained, it carved into her emotionally, hollowing her confidence, her identity, and her will to keep pretending that everything was fine. She never publicly named when or how it happened, but in a rare interview years later, her voice cracked as she said, "I felt like I had failed. As a woman, as a partner, and as someone who was supposed to keep going no matter what." This wasn't a headline. It wasn't a publicity stunt. It was a whisper in a world that only wanted her voice when it was composed, scripted, radiant. For weeks, she couldn't go near the set without feeling the weight of it all. The sterile hospital rooms, the pregnancy storylines, the babies. It was too much. She considered quitting the show, quitting acting altogether. Not because she no longer loved it, but because she could no longer separate the performance from the pain. Vincent, her partner, had his own battles with anxiety and depression, but in this moment, he became her quiet anchor. He painted her in silence, drew her grief into canvas, let her sit in stillness until she found the strength to move again. Privately, Asher entered therapy, not to fix herself, but to understand how to live with the loss, to reclaim her body, her voice, her art. In public, she returned to Offspring, now more fragile than ever, but also more fearless. Her performances took on a rawness that startled even her co-stars. One crew member reportedly said, "She'd walk into a scene and tear us apart with a glance." It wasn't long before the media noticed a shift. Asher was glowing, but differently, like someone who had survived something unspeakable and chose not to hide the scars. Later that year, she gave birth to her first child with Vincent, a son named Valentino. The press was jubilant. The golden girl was now a mother. But they didn't understand what it had taken to get there, what she had lost, what it had cost. In interviews, she never capitalized on the tragedy. She didn't brand it or embellish it, but she didn't hide it either. She allowed the grief to exist, not as a footnote to her success, but as part of it. The public, unknowingly, responded with fierce loyalty. Ratings for Offspring soared, awards kept coming, but more than admiration, what Asher earned was respect. Because while many actresses shone under the lights, she was one of the few who dared to flick the lights off and let us see her in the dark. At Aussie Uncovered, we've profiled many icons, stars who blazed across screens, who courted headlines, who built empires on charisma or controversy. But Asher Keddie doesn't fit any mold. She is, in many ways, a contradiction. Fiercely private, yet emotionally open. Quiet, yet undeniably present. Not the kind of actress who demands your attention, but the kind who earns it, deeply and permanently. What sets her apart isn't just talent, it's transparency. Not in the tabloid sense, not in oversharing or curated vulnerability, but in the way she inhabits her characters with a depth that can only come from lived experience. Watching Asher act is like watching someone remember pain, not perform it. We don't glorify suffering, but we do recognize the courage it takes to keep working, creating, and showing up in front of millions while carrying invisible wounds. Asher's story reminds us that not all resilience is loud. Sometimes it's as quiet as returning to set after losing a child. She never asked to be a symbol, but she became one. For women who've experienced miscarriage, for artists who've had to perform through heartbreak, for anyone who has ever felt like they had to keep moving when all they wanted was to stop. And yet, Asher's legacy isn't defined by tragedy. It's shaped by how she moved through it. How she turned private devastation into emotional truth on screen. How she used grief not as a wall, but as a lens, one that sharpened her understanding of humanity. We believe that's what makes her unforgettable. Not just because she played Nina Proudman, or because she won a gold Logie, or because she's graced every Australian TV award stage, but because she let us see her, not just the character, but the woman behind the eyes. And maybe that's the real power of Asher Keddie. She doesn't just act, she reflects us, our struggles, our hopes, our wounds. Now it's your turn. Do you remember the first time you saw Asher on screen? Did you know what she was carrying behind that luminous performance? Does knowing her story now change the way you see her roles, her silences, her tears, her strength? Let us know what Asher Keddie means to you. Nostalgia. Some legacies are built on applause, others on endurance. Asher Keddie's legacy is quieter, deeper, etched not into the glitter of red carpets, but into the hearts of those who saw themselves in her trembling hands, her unspoken grief, her strength that never needed to shout. She never chased the spotlight, and yet the spotlight always found her. Years from now, when people speak of golden eras in Australian television, they will speak of Offspring, of Paper Giants, of Love My Way. They will speak of the awards, the ratings, the characters. But those who truly watched, who truly felt, will remember something else. They'll remember the way she looked down, eyes flooded with loss, before delivering a line that broke your chest open. They'll remember how she never once felt manufactured. They'll remember that behind the brilliance was a woman who had nearly walked away. And they'll know that her decision to stay, to keep acting, keep creating, keep feeling, wasn't just a win for television. It was a quiet triumph of the human spirit. Because some stories are never told. But now you know. She gave us more than performances. She gave us pieces of herself, carved out through pain, polished through compassion. And long after the sets have gone dark and the scripts are forgotten, we'll remember her, not just as an actress, but as the woman who taught us how to keep going, even when everything inside says stop, even when no one else sees. Especially then.